So at this point, our slideshow looks good, but we still have one more slideshow we need to convert. So if we go over to our design, our mockup, down here in the written by our team section, we have forward and back navigation, which indicates that this is probably a slideshow. So let's take care of this. Now, before we actually implement our slideshow functionality, we first need to get the layout of our snippets squared away. So the tricky parts are going to be getting this image to the left of all of the content, and then lining these two snippets up right next to each other horizontally. So let's start with the image part. We'll go to the browser and take a look at what we have so far. I'm going to scroll down. All right, here's our written by our team section. And at this point, I'm going to maximize the browser and then move DevTools to the footer because we're kind of dealing with more of a horizontal spacing thing rather than a vertical like we were with our last slideshow. So oftentimes when we want to start stacking things horizontally, we'll end up using something called a float. I mentioned this property earlier in our slideshow as a property that was keeping us from using some of the possible vertical alignment strategies. So here's how a float works. If I inspect this element, what I'm going to do is edit the element style here, and I'll do float left. So what happens when we float it left is that it bumps the content to the left of the content below it, and then it wraps the elements below it around that content. So this would be kind of perfect for a situation where we had a thumbnail for an article and we did want to wrap text around it. In our situation, this is just part of the answer because we don't want it to wrap. We want the content to be lined up right next to it and have the photo in its own column. So one strategy that you can use to tackle this is by floating this content over to the left and then putting the rest of the content in a container div and setting the margin of the left to the value of the width of the content, so the width of our image here, plus any padding that we might want between the content on the left and the content on the right. Now this is a problem that could be solved nicely with Flexbox, but again we need to have other strategies just in case we need to support IE10, which for the most part desktop projects like this are going to need to support it. So in order for us to use the CSS that we need to have slightly different markup. We just need a container element around all of the content, and then we can deal with that chunk of content separately than the thumbnail.